Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates spent weekends at the mall or watching movies, she could be found at the local airfield, watching planes take off and land with wide-eyed wonder. Her father, a mechanic at the airport, would sometimes bring her along to work, and she would spend hours studying the aircraft, asking endless questions about engines, navigation systems, and flight patterns. The dream of becoming a pilot started when she was just 8 years old. A female pilot had made an emergency landing at their small airfield, and Sarah watched in amazement as the confident woman handled the situation with grace and skill. That night, she told her parents she wanted to fly planes when she grew up. Her mother smiled and patted her head, thinking it was just another childhood phase. Her father, however, saw something different in his daughter's eyes, a determination that reminded him of himself when he first fell in love with aviation. Throughout high school, Sarah worked part-time jobs to save money for flying lessons. She cleaned hangars, washed aircraft, and did whatever odd jobs she could find around the airport. The other teenagers thought she was crazy for spending her free time around those loud, dangerous machines, but Sarah didn't care. Every hour she spent at the airfield brought her closer to her dream. When she finally had enough money for her first lesson at 17, her instructor was surprised by her extensive knowledge of aircraft systems. She had been studying aviation manuals and watching educational videos for years. Her first time at the controls of a Cessna 172 felt like coming home. The instructor later told her father that in 20 years of teaching, he had rarely seen such natural instincts and passion for flying. By the time Sarah graduated high school, she had already earned her private pilot license. While her classmates headed off to traditional colleges, she enrolled in an aviation program at a technical school. Her parents were supportive but worried about the challenges she would face as a woman in a male-dominated field. They had heard stories about female pilots struggling to be taken seriously, facing discrimination, and having to work twice as hard to prove themselves. Sarah's college years were tough but rewarding. She excelled in her studies, earning top grades in navigation, meteorology, and aircraft systems. However, she quickly learned that academic success didn't shield her from the attitudes of some of her male classmates and even a few instructors. Some questioned whether women had the physical strength or mental toughness needed for commercial aviation. Others made jokes about female pilots, suggesting they were better suited for flight attendant roles. Despite the challenges, Sarah found allies among progressive instructors and fellow students, who judged her by her skills rather than her gender. She joined the college's precision flying team and quickly became one of their star performers. Her ability to execute complex maneuvers with accuracy and calm under pressure impressed even her harshest critics. She spent countless hours in flight simulators, perfecting her techniques and building the experience she would need for a commercial career. The transition from student to professional pilot was where the real challenges began. Sarah applied to numerous airlines and charter companies, often receiving polite rejections or being told they would keep her resume on file. Some companies were more direct, suggesting she consider other career paths or wait until the industry became more welcoming to women. The frustration was overwhelming at times, but Sarah's determination never wavered. Finally, after months of searching, she landed a position with a small regional cargo airline. The pay was modest and the hours were irregular, but it was a foot in the door of commercial aviation. Her colleagues were a mix of seasoned pilots nearing retirement and young men fresh out of flight school. Most were professional and respectful, but a few made it clear they thought hiring a female pilot was a mistake waiting to happen. Sarah's call sign at the cargo airline was Falcon 12, assigned randomly by the company's system. She loved the call sign immediately. Falcons were known for their precision, speed, and hunting prowess. It seemed to capture everything she wanted to be as a pilot. However, some of her colleagues began using the call sign mockingly, making jokes about pretty birds and suggesting that she would eventually fly away from the demanding world of commercial aviation. The mockery began subtly during Sarah's first weeks at regional air cargo. During pre-flight briefings, some pilots would smirk when her call sign was mentioned. In the break room, she overheard conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered. The jokes started small, comments about how Falcon 12 was the prettiest bird in the fleet or how falcons were delicate, creatures that belonged in cages rather than cockpits. Captain Rick Morrison, a 20-year veteran with graying temples and a permanent scowl, seemed to take particular pleasure in undermining Sarah's confidence. During crew meetings, he would make pointed comments about the importance of strength and stability in aviation, glancing meaningfully in her direction. When discussing challenging weather conditions or difficult cargo loads, he would wonder aloud whether certain pilots were up to the task. The breaking point came during her 3rd month on the job. Sarah was assigned to co-pilot a freight run to Denver with Captain Morrison. The flight plan showed potential thunderstorms along their route, and Morrison made several comments about needing an experienced pilot for such conditions. As they prepared for takeoff, he turned to her and said loudly enough for ground crew to hear, "Hope our little Falcon doesn't get her feathers ruffled by a bit of turbulence." During the flight, Morrison deliberately excluded Sarah from important communications with air traffic control, handling radio calls himself, even when protocol suggested the co-pilot should manage them. When they encountered moderate turbulence over Kansas, he made exaggerated corrections to the aircraft's flight path, then commented that some pilots might have panicked in such conditions. Sarah maintained her professionalism, but inside she was furious at being treated like an incompetent trainee. The situation worsened when they returned to base. Morrison filed a report suggesting that Sarah had shown hesitation during the turbulent weather, recommending additional training before she was cleared for similar flights. The accusation was completely false, but Morrison's seniority and reputation carried weight with management. Sarah found herself assigned to easier, shorter routes, while her male colleagues handled the more challenging and lucrative flights. Word of Morrison's report spread quickly through the small company. Other pilots began treating Sarah with a mixture of pity and condescension. Some genuinely believed Morrison's assessment and thought she needed protection from difficult assignments. Others saw an opportunity to advance their own careers by stepping into the routes she was being denied. The call sign Falcon 12 became a running joke. Pilots would use it sarcastically when discussing easy assignments or training flights. Sarah's confidence began to waver for the first time since she started flying. She found herself second-guessing decisions that would have been automatic just months earlier. During flights, she was hyper-aware of every minor adjustment, wondering if her actions would be scrutinized and reported. The joy she had always felt in the cockpit was being replaced by anxiety and self-doubt. The isolation was perhaps worse than the professional setbacks. Sarah had always been comfortable being one of the few women in aviation settings, but now she felt truly alone. Her attempts to connect with other pilots were met with polite but distant responses. Invitations to after-work gatherings mysteriously failed to reach her. She began to wonder if Morrison was right. Maybe she wasn't cut out for the demanding world of commercial aviation. At home, Sarah's family could see the toll the situation was taking on her. Her father, who had always been her biggest supporter, encouraged her to document everything and consider filing a complaint with the company's human resources department. Her mother suggested she might be happier in a different career, perhaps teaching or working in aviation administration. Both parents meant well, but their concerns only added to Sarah's feelings of doubt and failure. The financial pressure was mounting as well. The reduced flight hours meant smaller paychecks, and Sarah was struggling to pay back her student loans and cover basic living expenses. She began working part-time at a flight training school on weekends, teaching ground school classes to student pilots. The work was satisfying. She loved sharing her knowledge and passion for aviation, but it was a reminder of how far she felt from achieving her original dreams of flying for a major airline. 6 months into her ordeal at Regional Air Cargo, Sarah faced her darkest period. The constant undermining had worn down her confidence to dangerous levels. During a routine cargo flight to Phoenix, she found herself overthinking every decision, second-guessing instrument readings, and requesting multiple confirmations from air traffic control for standard procedures. Her co-pilot, a newer hire named Jake Thompson, noticed her unusual behavior and gently asked if everything was okay. That conversation became a turning point. Jake revealed that several younger pilots had been discussing the treatment Sarah was receiving, and many disagreed with Morrison's assessment. They had witnessed her skills during flight training and knew she was being unfairly targeted. However, as junior employees, they felt powerless to speak up against a senior captain. Jake's words reminded Sarah that not everyone believed the lies being spread about her abilities. Determined to reclaim her confidence, Sarah began a personal campaign to document her performance and rebuild her reputation. She arrived early for every flight, conducted thorough pre-flight inspections, and maintained detailed logs of all her activities. She volunteered for additional training courses, even though it meant using her own money and free time. Most importantly, she stopped allowing Morrison's comments to affect her flying. The opportunity to prove herself came during a particularly challenging winter month. A major snowstorm had grounded most flights across the Midwest, creating a backlog of urgent cargo deliveries. The company was desperate for experienced pilots willing to fly in marginal weather conditions. Many senior pilots were reluctant to take on the risky assignments, but Sarah volunteered for every available flight. Her first test came with a medical supply delivery to a small hospital in Montana. The weather was deteriorating rapidly, with snow, strong winds, and poor visibility. The airport had limited navigation aids, and the approach would require precise flying skills. Captain Morrison openly questioned whether Falcon 12 should handle such a dangerous mission, suggesting that a more experienced pilot should take over. Sarah's response surprised everyone in the briefing room. Instead of backing down or showing uncertainty, she calmly presented her flight plan, discussed weather alternatives, and demonstrated thorough knowledge of the destination airport's unique challenges. Her confidence and professionalism impressed the operations manager, who approved her for the flight despite Morrison's objections. The flight itself was a masterpiece of precision flying. Sarah navigated through the storm system with skill that impressed even the air traffic controllers monitoring her progress. Radio communications were crisp and professional. Her decision-making was sound, and she executed a perfect instrument approach in near-zero visibility conditions. The medical supplies were delivered on time, potentially saving lives at the remote hospital. News of the successful flight spread quickly through the company. The operations manager made a point of commending Sarah's performance during the next pilot meeting, noting that she had accomplished a mission that several more senior pilots had declined. For the first time in months, Sarah felt the respect and recognition she deserved from her colleagues. The momentum continued with a series of challenging assignments that Sarah handled flawlessly. An emergency freight delivery during a severe thunderstorm system showcased her weather flying skills. A complex multi-stop cargo run with tight timing demonstrated her efficiency and planning abilities. Each successful mission added to her growing reputation as a skilled and reliable pilot. Morrison's influence began to wane as Sarah's competence became undeniable. Other pilots started seeking her advice on weather flying and challenging approaches. The ground crew, who had always respected her professionalism, became more vocal in their support. Even some of Morrison's longtime allies began to distance themselves from his negative comments about Sarah's abilities. The shift in dynamics became apparent during a crew scheduling meeting. When a particularly demanding flight was announced, a time-critical cargo delivery to a remote airstrip with challenging terrain, several pilots in the room immediately suggested that Falcon 12 would be perfect for the job. The comment was made with genuine respect rather than mockery, and Sarah realized that her call sign was finally being associated with competence rather than derision. Sarah accepted the assignment with quiet confidence. As she prepared for the flight, she reflected on how much had changed since her difficult early months at the company. The scared, uncertain pilot who had doubted her abilities was gone, replaced by a professional who knew her worth and was ready to prove it to anyone who still questioned her skills. The assignment that would change everything came on a cold February morning. A massive winter storm had paralyzed air traffic across the Great Lakes region, stranding thousands of passengers and creating a crisis for cargo operations. Among the stranded shipments was a critical delivery of heart surgery equipment needed at Children's Hospital in Minneapolis. The delicate instruments were required for an emergency pediatric operation scheduled for the following day. Several senior pilots had already declined the mission. The weather forecast showed severe icing conditions, turbulence, and visibility near minimums at the destination. The cargo was not only time-critical but also extremely valuable and fragile. Any rough handling or delayed delivery could mean the difference between life and death for a young patient. The operations manager was running out of options when Sarah volunteered for the assignment. Captain Morrison was present during the briefing and immediately voiced his opposition. He argued that such a critical mission required the most experienced pilot available, not someone who was still proving herself. The operations manager, however, had been watching Sarah's recent performance closely. Her success rate on challenging flights was actually higher than most senior pilots, and her meticulous planning had impressed air traffic controllers across their route network. The debate over Sarah's assignment became heated. Morrison cited company policies about high-value cargo and weather minimums, while the operations manager pointed to Sarah's recent accomplishments and excellent safety record. Other pilots in the room were divided. Some supported Morrison's conservative approach, while others recognized Sarah's proven abilities. The tension was palpable as the decision hung in the balance. Finally, the chief pilot made the call. Sarah would fly the mission, but with additional oversight. She would be required to file detailed weather reports every 30 minutes and would be recalled immediately if conditions deteriorated beyond safe limits. The backup plan involved multiple alternative airports and contingency procedures. Morrison was visibly frustrated by the decision, but company protocol required him to support the assigned pilot. Sarah spent the next 3 hours in meticulous flight planning. She studied weather patterns, reviewed airport approaches, and calculated fuel requirements for multiple scenarios. She contacted air traffic control centers along her route to discuss current conditions and potential alternatives. Her preparation was so thorough that even Morrison grudgingly admitted her planning was adequate. The aircraft assigned to the mission was one of the company's newer twin-engine cargo planes, equipped with advanced weather radar and anti-icing systems. Sarah conducted an exhaustive pre-flight inspection, paying special attention to the de-icing equipment and engine heaters. The cargo loading was supervised personally to ensure the delicate medical equipment was properly secured and cushioned against turbulence. As departure time approached, the weather conditions at both origin and destination airports were deteriorating rapidly. Snow was falling heavily, and ice was beginning to form on aircraft surfaces. The airport operations crew was working frantically to keep runways clear, but visibility was dropping steadily. Several other flights had already been canceled, and pressure was mounting to scrub Sarah's mission as well. The decision to proceed came down to Sarah's professional judgment. The weather was challenging but still within legal limits for commercial operations. Her aircraft was properly equipped for the conditions, and alternative airports remained available if needed. Most importantly, the medical equipment in her cargo hold represented hope for a family whose child needed life-saving surgery. Standing in the operations center, surrounded by colleagues who had doubted her abilities for months, Sarah made the call that would define her career. She announced her intention to proceed with the flight, outlining her risk assessment and contingency plans. Her voice was calm and confident, displaying none of the uncertainty that had plagued her during the difficult early months. This was a pilot who knew her aircraft, understood the weather, and was ready to accomplish the mission. The room fell silent as Sarah's words sank in. Morrison started to object again, but the operations manager cut him off. The decision had been made by a qualified pilot following proper procedures. As Sarah headed toward the aircraft, she could feel the weight of expectation on her shoulders. This flight would either vindicate her place in the company or confirm the doubts that some still harbored about her abilities. The flight from Chicago to Minneapolis began in deteriorating conditions that would have challenged the most experienced pilots. Sarah completed her final pre-flight checks as snow accumulated on the aircraft's wings, requiring a second de-icing treatment before takeoff. The ground crew worked efficiently despite the harsh conditions, understanding the critical nature of the medical cargo in the hold. As Sarah taxied toward the runway, ice pellets drummed against the cockpit windows and wind gusts rocked the aircraft. Air traffic control was managing reduced capacity due to the storm, creating delays that threatened to worsen weather conditions at the destination. Sarah monitored weather updates continuously, calculating fuel burn rates and evaluating alternative airports in case a diversion became necessary. The takeoff roll was challenging but smooth, with Sarah compensating expertly for crosswinds and reduced visibility. As the aircraft climbed through the cloud layers, she encountered the severe icing conditions that had been forecast. Ice accumulated on the wings and fuselage despite the anti-icing systems running at full capacity. Sarah adjusted power settings and flight altitude to minimize ice accumulation while maintaining the most efficient route to Minneapolis. 30 minutes into the flight, Sarah encountered her first major challenge. The weather radar showed a line of intense snow squalls directly across her planned route, with reports of severe turbulence and icing from other aircraft. Air traffic control offered a routing change that would add 40 minutes to the flight time, potentially compromising the tight delivery schedule for the medical equipment. Sarah studied her options carefully. The direct route would take her through dangerous weather that could damage the aircraft or injure the precious cargo. The longer route was safer, but might delay the surgery equipment beyond acceptable limits. After consulting updated weather reports and calculating fuel requirements, she chose a third option, a modified route that would thread between the worst weather cells while minimizing time delays. Her decision proved brilliant. Sarah navigated through gaps in the storm system with precision that impressed air traffic controllers monitoring her progress. She maintained constant communication with weather services, adjusting course as needed to avoid the most severe conditions. The cargo remained stable throughout the flight, protected by Sarah's smooth flying techniques even during unavoidable turbulence. The approach to Minneapolis presented another set of challenges. The airport was reporting freezing rain, gusty winds, and visibility just above landing minimums. Several other aircraft had already diverted to alternate airports, and airport operations were considering closing the runway due to deteriorating conditions. Sarah requested immediate clearance for approach, knowing that any delay could force her to divert as well. The instrument approach required absolute precision. Sarah flew the aircraft manually rather than relying on autopilot, making constant adjustments for wind shear and changing visibility. Ice continued to accumulate on the aircraft despite anti-icing systems, affecting handling characteristics and requiring careful power management. The landing lights illuminated a world of swirling snow and ice as she descended toward the runway. Air traffic controllers watched Sarah's approach with professional admiration. Her flight path was rock-steady despite the challenging conditions, and her communications remained calm and precise throughout the descent. As she broke through the cloud layer just above minimums, the runway lights appeared through the snow like a beacon of hope for the critical mission. The landing was textbook perfect, despite conditions that had forced other pilots to divert. Sarah touched down smoothly on the icy runway and maintained control as the aircraft decelerated through standing water and slush. Ground crews were standing by to expedite the cargo unloading, knowing that minutes could make the difference for the young patient awaiting surgery. As Sarah shut down the engines and completed her post-flight procedures, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The flight had tested every skill she possessed as a pilot, and she had met each challenge with competence and professionalism. The medical equipment was delivered safely and on time, ready to save a life thanks to her willingness to fly when others would not. Word of Sarah's successful mission spread quickly through aviation circles. Air traffic controllers who had monitored her flight praised her decision-making and flying skills. The hospital staff expressed gratitude for the timely delivery that made their life-saving surgery possible. Even pilots from other airlines who had heard about the challenging conditions began to take notice of the female pilot who had accomplished what many veterans had declined to attempt. The aftermath of Sarah's Minneapolis mission marked a dramatic shift in how she was perceived throughout the aviation community. News of her successful flight in extreme conditions spread beyond regional air cargo, reaching other airlines, air traffic control centers, and aviation publications. The story of Falcon 12 completing a life-saving mission when experienced pilots had declined became legendary among cargo operators across the Midwest. Captain Morrison found himself increasingly isolated as Sarah's reputation grew. His attempts to downplay her accomplishment fell on deaf ears, especially when the chief pilot received commendation letters from Minneapolis Air Traffic Control and the Children's Hospital. The operations manager began assigning Sarah to the company's most challenging routes, recognizing her as one of their most capable pilots regardless of experience level. The transformation in workplace dynamics was remarkable. Pilots who had once whispered jokes about Falcon 12 now sought Sarah's advice on weather flying and challenging approaches. The call sign that had been a source of mockery became a mark of respect, with newer pilots expressing hope that they might someday earn similar recognition for their skills and professionalism. Sarah's confidence soared as she tackled increasingly complex assignments. A multi-stop cargo run through mountain terrain in Colorado showcased her navigation skills. Emergency medical flights during severe weather became her specialty, with hospital administrators specifically requesting that female pilot who always gets through. Each successful mission added to her growing legend within the regional cargo industry. The financial rewards followed her professional success. Sarah's increased flight hours and premium assignments significantly boosted her income, allowing her to pay off student loans and begin saving for future goals. More importantly, major airlines began taking notice of her exceptional record and reputation. Recruitment calls started coming in from carriers looking for experienced pilots with proven decision-making abilities. Regional air cargos. Management recognized they had a valuable asset in Sarah and offered her a promotion to senior pilot status, despite her relatively short tenure with the company. The promotion came with increased responsibilities, better routes, and the authority to mentor newer pilots. Sarah accepted the position with grace, remembering her own struggles and committing to ensuring other aspiring pilots would receive fair treatment and proper support. Morrison's behavior became increasingly erratic as his influence diminished. His complaints about Sarah's assignments and promotions were dismissed by management, who had clear evidence of her superior performance and professionalism. Other senior pilots began distancing themselves from Morrison's bitter comments, recognizing that his attitude reflected poorly on the entire pilot group. The breaking point in Morrison's campaign against Sarah came during a pilot meeting where he made particularly harsh comments about unqualified pilots receiving special treatment. Sarah had remained silent during previous attacks, but this time she stood up and addressed the room directly. She calmly recited her flight record, safety statistics, and recent accomplishments, then challenged anyone who questioned her qualifications to examine the evidence objectively. The room fell silent as Sarah's words sank in. Her statistics were impressive by any standard, and her recent performance had been exemplary. Morrison's face reddened as he realized his attack had backfired, exposing his prejudice while highlighting Sarah's achievements. Several pilots openly supported Sarah's response, finally breaking the code of silence that had protected Morrison's harassment for too long. Management's response was swift and decisive. Morrison was called into a private meeting with the chief pilot and human resources director, where his pattern of harassment and unprofessional behavior was documented and addressed. While the specific details remained confidential, Morrison's attitude towards Sarah and other colleagues improved dramatically almost overnight, suggesting that clear consequences had been established for future misconduct. Sarah's success began attracting attention from beyond the cargo industry. Aviation magazines featured articles about successful female pilots, often highlighting her story as an example of perseverance and professional excellence. Speaking invitations came from pilot organizations, aviation schools, and women's professional groups. Sarah accepted selected opportunities to share her experiences and encourage other women considering aviation careers. The culmination of Sarah's transformation came when she received an unexpected phone call from the chief pilot at Midwest Regional Airlines, a major passenger carrier. They had been following her career and were impressed by her record at regional air cargo. They wanted to offer her a position as a first officer on their regional jet fleet, with a clear path to captain status based on performance and seniority. The offer represented everything Sarah had dreamed of when she first started flying: the chance to fly for a major airline with opportunities for advancement and professional growth. Sarah's decision to accept the position with Midwest Regional Airlines came after careful consideration of her growth at regional air cargo and her long-term career goals. The transition would mean leaving behind colleagues who had become allies and starting over at a much larger organization. But the opportunity to fly passenger aircraft and advance toward captain status was too significant to pass up. Her final weeks at regional air cargo were marked by genuine respect and appreciation from management and fellow pilots. The operations manager praised her contributions during a company meeting, noting that her professionalism and skills had elevated the entire organization's reputation. Even pilots who had initially doubted her abilities acknowledged that she had proven herself beyond any reasonable standard. Captain Morrison approached Sarah privately during her last week, offering what appeared to be a sincere apology for his previous behavior. He admitted that his prejudices had clouded his judgment, and that her performance had forced him to examine his own attitudes about female pilots. While Sarah accepted his apology graciously, she recognized that his change of heart came only after her success had become undeniable to everyone around them. The transition to Midwest Regional Airlines brought new challenges and opportunities. The airline operated modern regional jets on scheduled passenger routes, Requiring different skills and procedures than cargo flying, Sarah entered their training program with enthusiasm, quickly mastering the advanced avionics and systems of the Embraer regional jets that form the backbone of their fleet. Her reputation had preceded her to the new airline. Training instructors had heard about the cargo pilot who had gained legendary status for her weather flying and decision-making abilities. They watched her performance closely, curious to see if the stories matched reality. Sarah's calm competence and thorough preparation quickly convinced them that her reputation was well-deserved. The call sign assignment at Midwest Regional followed a different system than cargo operations. Instead of company-assigned designations, pilots used the airline's flight numbers as their radio identifiers. Sarah's first passenger flight was designated Midwest 247, a routine morning departure from Chicago to Detroit. As she completed her pre-flight preparations, she reflected on how far she had traveled from the uncertain pilot who had once doubted her own abilities. The moment that validated everything Sarah had worked toward came during her first month at Midwest Regional. Severe thunderstorms had developed across the Great Lakes region, forcing numerous flight cancellations and delays. Air traffic control was struggling to manage reduced capacity while maintaining safety standards for the flights that could still operate safely. Sarah was assigned to fly from Chicago to Minneapolis on a route that would require careful navigation around multiple storm cells. The weather conditions were challenging but manageable for an experienced pilot with proper equipment and training. As she requested taxi clearance from Chicago Ground Control, the controller's voice came through her headset with professional respect. Falcon 12, taxi to runway 28 right via taxiway Alpha. Hold short of runway 10 left for crossing traffic. Sarah paused, confused by the use of her old call sign. She was flying as Midwest 247 now, not Falcon 12. Before she could respond, the controller's voice returned with a slight chuckle audible in his transmission. Sorry, Midwest 247. Old habits die hard when you're talking to a pilot with your reputation. Taxi to runway 28 right via taxiway Alpha. The recognition from an air traffic controller who remembered her cargo flying days filled Sarah with pride. Her reputation had transcended company boundaries and aircraft types. She was known simply as a skilled professional who could be trusted with challenging assignments and difficult conditions. The flight to Minneapolis proceeded smoothly despite the complex weather, with Sarah demonstrating the same precision and decision-making that had built her reputation. Passengers remained unaware of the skillful navigation required to avoid the worst storm cells, experiencing only minor turbulence during what could have been a very uncomfortable flight in less capable hands. Upon landing in Minneapolis, Sarah was greeted by ground controllers who had monitored her approach through the challenging weather. The tower supervisor made a point of commending her smooth handling of the arrival, noting that several other flights had requested delays or diversions due to the same conditions she had navigated successfully. As Sarah completed her post-flight procedures, she realized that the journey from mockery to respect was complete. The callsign Falcon 12 had evolved from a source of ridicule to a mark of professional excellence, recognized throughout the aviation community. Air traffic controllers, fellow pilots, and airline management all knew her as a competent professional who could be trusted with the most challenging assignments. The little girl who had watched planes at a small Texas airfield had grown into a respected airline pilot whose skills and determination had overcome prejudice and doubt. Sarah Martinez had proven that excellence speaks louder than mockery, and that persistence and professionalism ultimately triumph over those who judge based on stereotypes rather than ability. Her call sign would forever represent the transformation of doubt into respect, fear into confidence, and dreams into reality.